Welcome back to StoryTube, everybody. I'm here today to talk about two books together that I've read this year that I've talked about kind of extensively in our monthly wrap-ups, but I haven't dedicated their own space to. And I wanted to do that because they're both kind of turning out to become potential all-time favorites. And I realized sitting on them and thinking about them that they're kind of similar in some ways. So I wanted to dedicate them their own space, talk a little bit about them and why I love them and why I think there's a similar vibe to them. And if you like one, you might like the other as well. And those books are Ohio by Stephen Markley and Mystic River by Dennis Lehane. Now, really quickly, if you haven't heard me talk about them before, Ohio is kind of a character study of a place, if that makes sense. And it's set in one small town, a fictional town in Ohio, over one evening. And we have four friends, is kind of a loose term for it, but four people that went to high school together, kind of 10 years after they graduate high school, more or less, all converging in this on the same night. They're people that left the town, and as they are strolling down memory lane, quite literally, they get like bits and pieces of memories, and we piece together their past, and it kind of fits like puzzle pieces because they all remember it a little bit differently, and you get the whole picture only by the very end when you get all four stories and they kind of fit together. It's a genius structure for a book. And then we have Mystic River, which is a crime novel, sort of, where the basic premise is that we start with three childhood friends. One of them gets abducted for a couple of days and then manages to return, but something bad happened to him. And then we have a time jump forward, like 20 years forward. One of them has a daughter who gets murdered, and as we're investigating that murder, one of the three childhood friends is the detective. Let's say ghosts from the past come back to haunt them all. And what I think is interesting about these two books together is that they're both really sad. One of them, Mystic River, gets shelved in crime, and Ohio gets shelved in fiction. Both of them are quite literary, I think, and both of them feature some illegal behavior, let's say. So I find it interesting that they get shelved differently. I do think it makes sense for Ohio because the focus is more on the literary fiction side of things, the character study, the study of a situation and a time period and a place, and everything else. There is certainly a mystery, a kind of a central mystery there, but it's not the main point, it's not the main hook of the book. With Mystic River, I would argue that even though, yes, the mystery is more of the driving force behind the plot, it also isn't the main thing that you're meant to take away from it. Like, I'm not reading because I want to know what happened as much as I want to know what happens and what will happen to these people, if that makes sense. And the reason I care for the mystery is because I care for the characters rather than because of the mystery itself. But it gets shelved in crime because it's Dennis Lehane writing it, and he has written crime books, so he just gets put in crime by default. But I just think that's interesting because I think even though, yes, the focus is slightly different, they are very similar books in a lot of ways. Now, what is it that makes these books similar? I think the main thing is the feeling that they elicit. Like I said, they're both deeply sad books, and they're truly profound and about the people in them in quite a tragic way. And they're both very deeply rooted in place. Ohio more so, because obviously it's titled Ohio. It's very specifically about small town America at the beginning of the 2000s. Or like that generation that came of age in the early 21st century in small town America. Like, it is very specific to that. But like I said originally, when I talked about this in our wrap up, I think the feelings that the book elicits are universal even though they're very, very rooted in time and place. Mystic River is less so rooted in a specific place, even though it is set in Boston, but it is still a very specific experience to like working class city in America and like on the East Coast, and what kind of life people would lead there. Regular people. Both of these books focus on the lives of regular people of a lower socioeconomic class and of lower income and therefore less opportunities, and that reflects the lives they can lead, and it leads into what these books are exploring. So in a way, both of them are exploring the flip side of the American dream, or the corruption of the American dream, the American nightmare, if you will. And I found both of them very compelling in how they were approaching this, and through character study, and bringing you really, really close to people that, like I said, are kind of caught up in their own tragedy, and very morally grey characters. Like it's not like we have, you know, the underdog hero fighting the system. That is not the kind of story that this is. We have people that are victims of their situation without even realizing it necessarily. Some become villains of their story, some not so much, or there's everything in between. But it's a very real snapshot portrayal of a very specific situation and place. And I think the genius of both of these books is that you are at once putting yourself in somebody else's shoes and in that very specific scenario. However, the experience of being alienated, of having things in your life being out of your control, of this deeply sad nostalgia of things past, of missed opportunity, of not being able to stop certain things from happening, of the feeling of the inevitable tragedy to come, is present in both of these books and is, once again, universal. It's not a feeling that is specifically tied to the situations that these characters are in. And I think that's what makes both of these stories so powerful and so beautiful, and why I love them so much. Another thing that is kind of similar with the two books that I loved is the structure and how they play with perspective and unreliable narrators. Like I mentioned, Ohio has 4 perspectives. We have these 4 people, and we have the book is divided into 4 parts. So we have the first part, which is like the first person's chunk of the evening, basically. And then we go to the second person, and we might go a little bit back in time and see where they were, and we catch up. But we don't understand the implications of what the first person was doing until we read the 4th part, and then it all kind of comes together in an epilogue. So it is very much like puzzle pieces, but everybody's memories are a little bit different, as they would be if you were to talk to somebody that you went to high school with. You probably remember it differently from them, even if you're talking about the same specific event. But it goes a bit further than that, where people are repressing memories, people are deliberately lying to each other, people are lying to themselves, people are omitting information, people are willfully misremembering. And when you tell yourself the same lie enough times, you end up believing it yourself, or you don't remember what it was that was the lie and what it was that was true. So you're kind of just along for the ride, going for like all these like bits and pieces of memory that are not chronological. And at the same time, you're in the present, meeting all these people again, and then you go from one to the next, and you start like getting memories from another perspective, and you're like, hold on, this sounds familiar, but that's not how the other person saw it, or like, oh, this is the context for that. And it just keeps changing your perspective, almost like you're playing with a Rubik's Cube, even more so than a puzzle piece, where like each perspective is just twisting it a little bit further until at the end you finally see all the colors on all the sides. And it's kind of a genius way to do it, and it's very real, because there is just often no one objective truth, because if you're looking at memory is different, memory is subjective, you have your own interpretation attached to it. And at the end, we get some objective fact, but others aren't. And I just think it was done in a genius way. And Mystic River is a little bit different, a little bit more straightforward in its structure, but we do get the three main perspectives of the three guys, the three friends. So we have the one that was abducted, the one that's now the detective on the case, and the father of the girl that was murdered. And the one that's now a detective is of a slightly more middle class family, so he's a little bit better off. That is tension straight away, and he doesn't go super deep into like class issues because I don't think the characters are thinking about it all that deeply, but it is a quintessential part of who they are, and he makes it feel very natural. It's just a part of their being and of how they think and behave and how their brains work and how they are with each other. But what he does with perspective and with unreliable narrators as well is that you are in their heads, but they, once again, are kind of lying to themselves or are avoiding thinking about certain things. And as they're lying to somebody else, you might be able to tell that they're lying from how they're thinking about it, but they're also not telling you the truth. And he pulls it off, and it's a difficult thing to pull off when you're in a really close third person or first person perspective. But he toes the line really well where they are lying to you because they are lying to themselves, or because they don't want to admit something themselves, or because they're doubting themselves, because maybe they're drinking, maybe they're dealing with trauma, maybe they're just repressing something in general. So they are questioning themselves. You question them. You don't know what to believe. They don't know what to believe. And it's all what ends up cascading into a tragic turn of events. Once again, you at the end are the one that has all the puzzle pieces to put together to understand the full picture and the full story. You might even start to understand it before they understand it, which makes it even sadder because you can see where it's going and there's no way to stop it. The way they would have no way to stop it. It's kind of genius because it works as a narrative structure, but at the same time, it makes you feel the way the characters would feel. And it almost makes you feel like you're a part of this destiny that is pulling them forward and of the world that has put them in a certain situation that they can't fight and that they're just stuck in and have to deal with. And some people are resigned to it. Some people are trying to make the best out of it. Some people are just leaning into it and really fucking up and not giving a shit. And it's beautiful. They both have very nice prose as well. Like I found them unpretentious but extremely readable and just beautiful in a haunting, dark, sad kind of way. Ultimately, I think what I'm trying to say, and the reason that I love both of these books so much and that they resonated with me and with each other as I was thinking about them, was that they elicited a very deeply rooted feeling of tragic, sad nostalgia. Like nostalgia for the past, not necessarily when things were easier, but when you didn't know that they were hard or you didn't know that they were going to get hard. And not that I have experienced anything similar to what any other characters in these books experience, like in a literal way. But the beauty of it is that you don't have to have gone through the exact same thing to understand what they're feeling and to empathize with it and for them to hit you really hard on a really personal level. These are two books that I will probably never stop thinking about because they manage to be universal by being extremely specific. I generally think if you have read Ohio, you would like Mystic River. And if you have read Mystic River and liked it, obviously, you would also like Ohio. I don't really see a reason for you to not like one if you've liked the other. unless you've liked them for completely different reasons than what I just said, and you're like, you're completely wrong, that's stupid, then, you know, maybe not. But if any of what I just said resonated for the book that you've read, read the other one. I really cannot recommend them highly enough. If you haven't read either, give them a go. I think they're both extremely worthy of your time. They're both very well written books with something to say, but that you can still enjoy on a basic story level. Especially Mystic River. I think Ohio is a little bit more work just for the structure alone, and it takes a little bit longer maybe to start to see the bigger picture. But I still loved every second of Ohio. So yeah, they're both also quite dark. So like they're tough reads. Like there's nothing fluffy and happy about them. But I don't think you'd be expecting that if I'm calling them the American Nightmare. But yeah, so have you read Mystic River or Ohio or both? Let me know. I think these are fantastic books. I also want to shout out Kev from the channel, Kevin Jenkins, because he was the one that recommended Ohio, and I read it as a part of the month of Kevruary back in February. So thank you so much for recommending this. This is one of my favorite books of all time. And I also want to shout out somebody that you might have heard of, perhaps. I'm not sure. His name is Carlos. He's on this channel sometimes. And he loves Dennis Lehane. And Dennis Lehane has become, or will become, a favorite writer. I still haven't read anything else by him, but I absolutely will in the near future, because he just worked for me. It was 50 pages in and I was like, yeah, this is my jam. This just works. It's deep, introspective, interesting, thematically rich crime that doesn't forget to also be a page turner and be compelling in its plot. And it's kind of rare to find that, to be honest. On that note, I will leave you be. Let me know if you have read these, what you think of them. Like the video. If you liked it, feel free to dislike it. If you didn't like it, that's fine. And, you know, subscribe to the channel and all that stuff. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.